Hi, it's Robbie from Southern California, and I'm sitting in my bird garden this morning having coffee. And what I decided to do today is go over some of the questions and comments that I got on how I water my vegetable garden, because I know a lot of you do it differently, and of course, and that's what I want to talk about. And I want to do it quietly because this is what I get to see every morning. And there's sometimes even more birds than what you're going to see. We have so many birds in the garden here. It's unbelievable. But let's get into some of the comments and questions. And so you'll understand what I'm trying to do when I show videos or ways that I do my gardening. Now, many of the questions that were on there were very similar. So we'll just kind of go over in general. Like a few of you have mentioned, I thought you're not supposed to wet the plants. That is true. If you wet your plants, let's say in the morning, and it doesn't dry quickly, you can get powdery mildew. I don't water in the morning, but it can happen at night as well. If you are warm and dry, it's not going to hurt if you wet your plants either early in the morning or at night, as long as your humidity isn't too high. Now, the problem with wetting the plants and growing powdery mildew is if it stays too wet too long, then yes, you'll get powdery mildew, and we get a lot of that in the spring. You see it, and yet the plants continue to grow, even with the powdery mildew, and I get a ton of zucchini and vegetables on there. So that's not an issue. Think about it when it rains. If it rains, your plants are getting wet, what are you going to do? You'll get powdery mildew that way. So you have to do what works best for you. As far as drip irrigation tubing doesn't work in my area. My neighbor, he had it all over and it got pulled out by the coyotes. It was all chewed up. My other friend had all his chewed up by squirrels and rats. You can get it caught if you're working in the garden. You can cut it accidentally. For me, and for my area, it just doesn't work really well. Unless you're really on top of it and you're ready to replace the tubing and watch for tubings that break, because when they break, it just fizzles all out all over. It's just not something I want to get into. I happen to love to make sure I've got this time to go into the garden and be part of nature and check my plants by going through with a hose, and that's in the summer, a heavy hose. I can see my plants, how they're growing. I know what's doing good. I know what's not doing good. I know which ones need more water than others. I'm connecting with my plants. So that is one thing, this works for me. This is why I really enjoy doing it this way. I have a big connection with my plants. You can see that even in the heat of the summer, I have a lot of stuff that's still growing. And of course, I've got a lot of stuff that isn't doing all that well. So that is one thing. It's a connection between me and my plants. Now, if I was going to use grow bags here, I would have to have some sort of drip irrigation, because I've talked to a few people in my area and they have to water their grow bags, 3, 4, 5 times because it dries out so quickly. The way I garden, my plants don't dry out that much. So it just depends on how you're growing and what situation you're growing in. Now, a couple of you were having problems as far as watering your containers, your pots, and you were saying that you have found that though it looks wet when you water, when you go back and check, a lot of your pots have pulled away from the side, the soil. So it's kind of like a sponge. It's kind of pulling in instead of going out, and you're finding out your water is running out. Isn't this beautiful out here? That happens in the ground as well. I've spoken about that so many times. What's happening is your soil isn't holding the soil as good as it should. In the beginning, when you first set it up, everything's damp, and as long as it stays damp, then it will retain the water. As you have your soil in the heat, and we're talking like 95, 100 degrees or more, the soil starts to dry out. And as it dries out, you re-wet it, it doesn't absorb the water. So what it does is it creates kind of like rivers all over. So you'll water your plants and it will look wet, only to find out that it's got, let's use the term, holes in the soil, and the water is finding these rivers of holes going straight to the bottom and draining out. And you don't really have the water staying in your totes. And that's why when I blast it, it mixes it up. It's kind of like making a cake, and you wouldn't just pour all your water in there, or your milk and your oil and eggs in a bunch of flour and then just dump it in your pan, because not the whole thing is going to absorb. Well, that's what happens when you're watering your totes. You're watering that and it's just going to go wherever it wants to go. So you mix your cake mix and you incorporate everything really well together. That's what I'm doing with the heat. Now, there was also somebody said, I think it was Arthur, he mentioned, well, you can't do that with seedlings. Oh, of course not. When I go through and I blast it like that, I'm going to lose the volunteers. I don't care about the volunteers right now. I want to grow food in the heat of our summer. So yes, the volunteers become compost. Now I've got some totes that I've set up with seeds. I just direct sowed them and put in some cucumber seeds. They're growing. And I have to remember that when I go to those totes, I do hand water with a watering can. That's important, because if I go through in the fashion in which you saw me, my little seedlings are going to just go back into the soil much deeper than they need, and they will become compost. This is not something I do regularly. This is something I do when it's hot. If it stays hot, like 100 degrees for a week, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to blast them. Just like I told you, John Kohler had gone once to a plant show and they were selling things, and they had this nozzle they were selling for X amount of money. It could have been $20. And what they said is you attach it to your hose and you blast the soil and it creates oxygen in your soil. All it was a brass nozzle that you can buy at the store. I've picked them up for $5, and you can water your driveway down, water your plants. It's adjustable. This particular one was not. And what he was doing or explaining is by blasting the soil, you get that mix. So everything's going to mix up and you have more of your soil holding the water. Again, this isn't needed in the spring, and it isn't needed if you're in an area that's getting a lot of rain. I mean, we had one little rainstorm the other day, and that was it. And we haven't seen rain for the longest time. So isn't this nice to have coffee out here? So this is depending on your weather, your climate, and like mine, it works for me. You can see what's going on. My plants are not on a drip system. They're on me going through with my hose and blasting them. And like I said, I may not do all of them, but for me it works. I've had a couple people come in, say all their plants died. I kind of know where some of these people live in the area, and I don't think they should have lost their plants. I think they were using the watering can, and when they did that, just hand watered it, walked away. The water would go find these little rivers that they can take off and leave the container, and then their plants end up dry within 2 hours. And the rest of the day, they're basically just drying up if there's not enough water around the roots. So that is very important on knowing how you're watering. There's a lot of ways you could do that. You can vary different things in the ground to hold water and slowly release water. You can make trenches. Gary, right now in his garden, he told me he's making trenches around the plants, and we're talking deep trenches. So he can fill these trenches, and hopefully the water holds there and slowly seeps around the roots of his plants. So think about what will work for you. I am not a YouTube gardener that's going to come on and tell you what to do. I don't feel I should, or anybody should be telling you what to do. I think that what you need, and we all need, is advice, tips, ideas on how things are done, so we can step back, look at our own setup, and then go from there what will work for us. This river, I'm telling you, that pulls away from the roots, the water disappears, happens in the ground as well, not just totes and containers. So think about it. Get the idea, step back, look at your garden, and see what will work for you. Because we are all individuals, and our gardens are individuals. Our area, our climate, our microclimates are all individuals. Again, some of you have asked, well, I use the shower setting. On my deck, I'm not going to blast everything. It'd be a real mess. I do too use the shower setting. And sometimes if I see it's not working well for my plants, I actually have a lot of little forks, regular forks like you would eat with. I can get 4 for $1 at a lot of stores. They sell them. They're cheap. It's not anything silver or anything like that. And you can kind of scratch up the soil pretty good and make holes in there. And then you can use a shower setting, which is a softer way of putting water on, and then it will go into the soil. So of course that's okay. And then again, so many, of you say, well, I water in the morning, not at night. We have to water what works for us. Here's the issue. If I water in the morning and we are 100 degrees, by evening, my soil is almost dry, okay? And my squash, zucchini, needs more water than anything, and so do watermelon. So if I water in the morning and we're 105 degrees, my soil around the roots, good chance, will be very dry. Then that means my plant has to sit all night in that dry soil that may be too dry to produce fruit because a lot of that fruit uses tons of water. And then by morning, it's really struggling and stressed the plant until I hit it with water. This is my theory, the way I do it. I'm not asking you to change the way you do it. By me watering at night, the water is going to the base of the plant, it's going into the soil, and the plant, who had a really hard day, gets to pull all that up in a nice, cool evening atmosphere and rejuvenate with water. By morning, it did not dissipate. It didn't go anywhere because there was no sun. It didn't dry out, so all that soil is still damp, really good for the plant. This is for hot weather especially. And in the morning, it's going to continue to draw the water until the water starts to disappear from evaporation from the heat, which is what, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock? So it's only struggling for a small amount of hours compared to if I did it the other way, my plants would struggle more. Maybe that's why I get tons of zucchini full of water. And when I don't water like this, I get smaller, drier fruit. So this works for me. And this way I know my plants are pulling up water all night. And it doesn't have to struggle. You water in the morning, as soon as the sun comes up, it's really hot. The plant is struggling to pull that water up really fast before it hits 100 degrees. And then by then, the sun is just evaporating all your water. This is my theory. This is the way I think. So you have to think what will work, how for your area. And you know what? Maybe try a couple of your plants different ways and see what works best. It also depends on if you work, when is the best time for you to water your plants. And that is another thing that you'll have to think about. Again, what will work best for you? Another person came in, and you don't really have names now. You've got handles, so it's just a bunch of letters. So I don't know who you are until you fix those handles back into your names. But you were saying your temperature is over 105, and you found that when you water your plants, the roots are steamed, and it's hard on your plants. I've never had that. I use black totes, all different totes. If your roots are steaming, then the only thing I can say is your pots may be too small. I don't know if you're talking about little pots because my totes don't have that problem. Small pots, of course, will dry out quickly. So I'm not sure about the steaming. Maybe this goes back to watering in the morning because now you've got all that water in your pots that are going to heat up so quickly. So you water at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and if you're at 105, your water is going to get hot real fast. The plant doesn't even have time to pull it up into the roots. So I would think your plants may benefit from being watered at night so the plant can pull up all the water it needs, because otherwise if you're watering in the morning, your plants only have a couple hours to pull enough water up before it starts, as you call it, steam. Not sure how to answer it, but that's the best I can do on that. Valerie, I love your thing. I water like you do. I turn my hose on and jet the water around my plants. I love it. I love watering. It's so relaxing. Yep, it works. And again, like you know what I'm saying, we're doing this only in the heat of the summer. We're not doing this when it's raining, cold. We're cold, we're watering once a week. It really, I have found, has been beneficial for the plants. So I'm not blasting the roots. I'm blasting it away from the roots, around the sides of my totes, around the sides of my raised beds, not on top of the roots. I'm not trying to blast the plant out of the ground, but I'm trying to mix the soil up. And if you feel your hose is too strong, maybe mine looks strong and it's not as strong, then turn it down a little bit. But for me, it works, and obviously it must work for somebody because they're selling nozzles that do this. So again, I'm glad it's working for you. Just, you probably saw me do it for the past few years. I've been showing how I water. And again, I have a garden all summer. May not look the best. Of course, it's gonna look better in the fall when we cool down and in the spring, but at least I have a garden. Many questions coming in about me blasting and getting the plants all wet and they're sitting all night in the water. I'm really not blasting the leaves. If you look, I'm not taking it like you would shower your plants and wash them off. I'm not really wetting the leaves that much at all. I'm going around the plants, and enough of that will kind of go over to other plants if there's more than one plant in there. So I'm not hosing the plant itself down. Though that can be good, you can get up in the morning and hose it down really good if you've got powdery mildew, if you've got insects, then you can blast the dickens out of your plants and get a lot of those insects off. I have done that, but that wasn't what this was about. This video that I had put up the other day was about watering my plants and making sure that they're going to continue to grow through the heat of the summer is what it is. So don't blast the leaves themselves. Try to go around the base of the plant, but not so close to the plant. Like I said, keep it 6 to 8 inches away if you can, and go around it. And of course, using a shower sprayer nozzle is fine too, because when it's not that hot, that's what I do. Could you imagine if I was watering all my plants with a watering can? I probably would have to start in the morning and I would be done by the next morning. This is really quick, and if I miss something in the fashion in which I am watering, they don't even seem to struggle. They're fine the next day. So this is just a method that works for me. Off topic. Suzanne came in asking about the deer, how I'm dealing with the deer. I have to admit, I haven't seen any deer for months. So where they are right now, I have no idea. They must have found someplace better to graze. And so I don't have them problem like, the problem that I had last year where they pulled all my tomatoes off. I will say I'm lucky here. My deer are very lazy. So if I drape tulle over something, they skip it. They go on to something else. You said they pulled it off. I don't know, but I'll tell you what you could do. Spray the tulle, get a spray bottle, and spray it with vinegar. The tulle, not the plant. So spray it all over that, and they may not like that scent. So try that, because I've done that with tulle, sprayed the tulle, or even dipped the tulle in some vinegar, let it dry a little bit, and put it on, and that has gotten rid of rodents really fast if you have a problem rodent. So maybe try that. That's interesting. The Brisbees, I like your name, cute. You were saying my yellow zucchini failed in the heat as well. Don't think I'll plant them again. The gray zucchini was wonderful, even in the plus 100 temperature. I will admit that. This year I planted 4 or 5 yellow zucchini, and with the heat, it seemed like what they did, the yellow zucchini, is they produced a lot of fruit. Oh, I've got so much of it. And I'll tell you something, I'm actually not as crazy about it as regular zucchini. And as soon as they produced a lot, no matter how I watered them, a few of them did just die. Like they were done. I gave you 3 or 4 fruit per plant, and that was it. Where I have found the black beauty, the gray zucchini, they will keep going. And they'll go even, like I said, throughout the winter, as long as we're not super cold. So it's funny you brought that up, because I was telling Gary yesterday, I don't know if I'm going to plant yellow zucchini again, because I don't produce a lot. It seems like it produces kind of like cucumbers do. They'll produce a whole bunch, and a lot of times, no matter what you do, you can't save the plant. Well, I think that's what's going on, is it's produced, it's done its thing, and maybe it's just the plant itself, so there's not much I can do about that. So I'm with you. I'm going to stick with regular zucchini. Billie Jean, you said you're in the UK and it literally rains every day. Well, that's it. You've answered your question. Then you don't need to water that much. You know, we live here in Southern California, and though we had a lot of rain this past winter, we have had almost no rain here now in the summer. So this is why I've got to water. And not only do we have no rain, but a lot of times our humidity is so dry. It's not real humid. That this is why you have to take care of your plants. It doesn't matter if it's in a tote, a flower pot, or even in the ground. A lot of them will dry up. I saw somebody's plants that were just too dry, and they were telling me there's something wrong with my tomato plants. They're not growing this year, and I'm watering them. And I kind of checked it and said, you know what? Your tomato plants aren't getting water, but I'm watering it. No, they're not getting water. They think they're getting water because they're really watering them real good, but they're not getting to the base of the roots. And so I said, if you trench them or give them a really good soaking, real hard, maybe even once or twice a week, it'll make a difference. And now I've heard that their tomatoes, with their change, is bursted into fruit. Oh, wow, they all took off for a minute. Oh, other birds are coming in. Now, there were other comments about wasting water. I told you that I do my whole garden in the heat in 30 minutes. That's not running the hose for 30 minutes. That's turning on the hose, running it for about 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there. It may look like a lot of water, but let me tell you something. It's not a lot of water. We are not on well water. We're on regular water, but we are in an area where I have to pay a base price, which is about $80. So I don't know if that's high or low for your area. Everybody's different. So if I don't use the water, and this happened once, and if you don't turn the water on for, let's say, weeks, your bill will still be $80. And let me tell you that in the summer, it just barely goes over that, if it even does sometimes. In the winter, even when I don't use a lot of water, we have this base price. And I've tried to ask them exactly how many gallons or how did they measure it. And you know, they won't tell me. They just said that's the base price. So that's what I'm paying. And you know what? I'm going to use it because I'm going to have to pay whether I use it or not. Now, another thing is, a few of you have asked about chlorine. Chlorine itself is not that big of a deal because it evaporates quite quickly. If you squirt your hose while it's going through the air, a lot of the chlorine will come out of the water before it even hits the ground. So a lot of times when I'm filling my fountains, or I should say, well, not just the fountains, but let's say the ponds, I hit the side of the rocks or the cement that's around the fountain or the ponds, and it will, by hitting it, even get more of the chlorine out. Now, I am talking about chlorine. But the water that you're drinking has chlorine in it. It has not hurt any of the plants here in any way. It hasn't hurt any of the earthworms or anything in the soil. So as far as chlorine, I'm not worried about it. We have also hard water, which has a lot of calcium and different nutrients, I guess you could say, in it. We're fine. Now, chloramine is something else. And let me tell you something. A couple times they added that in, and I could tell because it actually affected me when I went to take a shower, and I called them right away. I don't know why they would switch. I made a big stink about it, and they went back right away. So I don't know what that was all about. Chloramine is tougher. It will be harder because that's something you actually have to buy a chemical if you've got a pond to get the chloramine out. Where chlorine, you can fill up your bucket, you can fill your pond with it, and by the next day, most of it is out. So I'm going to have to say for here, the amount of chlorine they use is not that big of a deal, and it hasn't hurt anything. We drink it. Well, we don't drink that water anymore. We have now a purifier in our house, but I still use it for cooking and different things. And the dogs get purified, the animals get purified, but outdoor in the fountains, no, it's just tap water, so the chlorine is there and it evaporates. It's fine. It's such a small amount anyways. And when I do blast my plants, does it disperse and change around my mulch on top, which could be wood chips, and sometimes I forget to mulch, to be perfectly honest, but the leaves fall and I just throw things there. Yeah, it does. But if a hard rain came, or there was a rain and there was some flooding and moving of water, it moves things around too. So it's not that big of a deal. The main thing for me right now is to keep my plants alive. I want to be able to go out there, and I am still picking kale and collard, and my cucumbers are growing like mad, and my zucchini is growing, and my tomatoes. They need water too. A lot of these plants absolutely have water. So my main thing is to keep my plants alive so I can feed my family and whoever else needs. It changes all the time. Like I said, we had rain, and the day we had rain, even though it wasn't that much, it was enough for me to skip that day. I mean, our humidity was high, it rained. So this is going to change possibly even daily. All I'm saying is, anytime I say something, I want you to understand, I'm not getting up there and pointing and saying this is the way to do it, because I don't believe in that. I believe we have to do what will work for us. I believe we have to understand our own garden. This goes with anything in life. I believe we have to step back and see the best solution for your problems. And I actually believe that almost every problem, every issue has some sort of solution. So you have to step back and analyze where you're growing, how you're growing. I mean, if you cannot water in the evening, then of course you water in the morning. It's still good, and it may work even better for you. But the point is, you're going to have to do things the way you like doing things, or you won't do it. All I want you to do is grow food. And that is the main thing. And if you don't want to grow in the summer, and you want to wait till the weather cools, that's fine too. Do what works good for you. Don't let anybody tell you anything if you feel it's wrong. Step back, look at it, and say, hey, this is the way I'm going to do it. Or experiment, try different things. And then maybe you'll find out you can tweak it even differently, and it will work perfect for you. So I hope I gave you some insight on that. And again, it may look like I'm using a lot of water, but the water is literally only on for not even 30 minutes till I walk to the other garden and I go through and look at my plants. It's 5 minutes here. My chair garden, 2 minutes, if the water is even on that long. And the bird garden, 5 minutes. So it looks like a lot of water, but it's not. Think of lawns. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of water. Deep soaking trees, that's a lot of water. There's a lot of water being wasted out there. I've seen sprinklers going out into the streets and watering the streets down, or people watering and just laying their hose down and just leaving. That's not watering anything. That's just dropping your hose and having everything flood out. So if you think it's really a lot of water, I'm going to go by my bill, and I'm going to say I haven't really gone past the base price, which I'm going to be charged whether I turn my water on in the house or not. So I'm going to stick with that. So I hope I've given you some more insight on all this, ideas, and well, that's what I want to do. I just want you to grow something and be happy growing. And if you're not growing and you're watching us for hummingbirds, that's okay too. But I tell you, I really would like to see you grow something, even if it's just some lettuce or parsley or mint to put in your coffee or in your tea. With that, have a wonderful day. And don't forget to eat what you grow. And I hope you enjoyed the birds. Bye-bye. I so love doing this every morning. And let me tell you, it's relaxing. Oh, my cousin, he doesn't even know. Yeah, I just love this. My cousin, who I haven't seen for a long time, I found him on YouTube. He's got a channel. He's my mother's youngest brother's son. And he does a lot. He's a life coach, so he does kind of like therapy work. And I actually listen to him at night if I can't sleep. I just turn it on. I've got a phone, an old Apple that is no good, but it still works, for that. And I can turn him on and just go to sleep listening to him. And he did one on nature and researched it. And he's so on, because there's nothing more beautiful than to sit out in the garden or just sit on a chair and listen to the birds around. There's somebody, you all have some sort of birds. And it really is so relaxing. So I'll put his link if you want to check him out. I get a kick out of it. Like I said, I don't even know if he really knows I'm watching him that much. With that, have a wonderful day. And don't forget to eat what you grow. Bye-bye.